Oh, is everybody here? Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, December 7th, 2022 Scarborough Board of Education workshop. Diane, can we call the attendance?
Sure. Mrs. Gammon?
Here.
Mr. Kelleher?
Here.
Ms. Leong?
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Here.
Ms. Tarpinian?
Here.
Mr. Peeny Huff?
Here.
Mr. Shumway?
He's been excused.
And Ms. Leisure?
She's been excused. Thank you. Great. Would everybody please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, agenda item 4.0 is the workshop. 4.1 is the diversity, equity, and inclusion committee charge. So for this, I will turn it over to Frayla and Julie.
So I'm going to reference the document that was sent out in the materials, titled the Scarborough School Board Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. That's what the title of the document says. I think in it, it says like government's document 30. Just so people are all looking at the same document. And I think that's the only one that was sent out that's related to that I'm aware of. So I propose we just sort of move through it and see where people are at. I would where my particular area of interest and where I would like to focus, but obviously up to everyone, is the charge. And we can get to that. We can go. I think it just makes sense to go through in order unless people have a different opinion. All right. So starting up at the top at the purpose. I think we can have a vague purpose statement that's generally supportive. I think I drafted this just sort of trying to be vague, but also trying to like explain what do we mean by DEI. I think that's helpful for folks in the committee to focus on what we want them to focus on. And then also when we're explaining it, like I have trouble, having been on the committee for 3 years, explaining what DEI means sometimes. And I feel like it has a lot of connotations, both negative and positive. And I really want to avoid that at all possible and move towards what we as this body want that committee, which is a creation of this body, to do. So that's where this purpose statement comes from. But I could read it. That makes sense. All right. So right now, what it proposes is to say the committee's purpose is to ensure that Scarborough is fulfilling its obligation to meet each student individually and ensure that they meet their full potential through access to a high quality public education by identifying and reducing systemic and individual barriers which inhibit a student's growth. So with that, any sort of feelings, thoughts?
For me, it was, I appreciate what you were saying earlier about it. It feels really broad.
Yeah.
And so like, how do we narrow that in so it actually fits within DEI? Because this feels like something that, you know, Jeff or Diane might be, it's like that higher level as opposed to focused on DEI. What the solution is to that, I'm not sure what the right wording would be, but I'd like to narrow that in a little bit, because then sometimes you can get off.
What is DEI?
Yeah.
So like, that's my first like query, and that is
That's a loaded question.
I want to avoid
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not interested in the political nature of that debate. Like,
Yeah.
I want to avoid that because that's not what this committee is focused on.
Right.
What I think about DEI is different students who have different needs. I think race is the one everyone reaches to. It's easy, it's visually appealing. It's a big topic, has been for my entire life, for everyone's entire life in this room, for the history of probably our country in a lot of ways. But I don't want this committee to be focused on race, because I don't think that encapsulates the diversity that we see in Scarborough. I want it to encapsulate everything, that people who have disabilities, people who have different abilities, if you will, you know, people who are neurodivergent, people who have physical impairments, and people who speak different languages. Any sort of thing that makes it hard for a student to be successful. You know, and whether that's the big topics, you know, the national debate topics, or really just for that individual student. Being bullied on the school bus is one that is really close to my heart. I hear a lot about that. And that really concerns me because I don't want any child, I don't care what ism they have or have not. I don't want them to feel stress going, I want to help make their experience in Scarborough positive, and I want to eliminate things that make it hard for them to be successful at their education, because that's what we're here for, education. So I don't know how to encapsulate that. It is vague,
Yeah.
but I don't want this committee to be like, we're just focused on pick an ism, pick any ism.
Right. Well, and I guess my wonder is, like, usually the overall mission statement for something is really vague and then it hones down. So, you know, as we move down and look at the charge, like, is that where we get that definition that you're wondering about?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do wonder too, I don't know if this would help, Frayla and I went back and forth on including the categories that we had, because when the board initially formed this committee, it was, to Frayla's point, not to focus on just one ism or one category, but to really look at everything happening in Scarborough. So another big one in Scarborough is the socioeconomic status of individuals who live here and how it can be wildly different. Right, and so what we did at that point was include, we said, i.e. race, gender, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, disability, or socioeconomic status. So if we included that back in, because we had pulled it out
Yeah.
and, but does that kind of,
That feels tighter. Yeah. That feels,
I wonder, would it make sense to break it down by just taking D, E, and I and defining each one? So we'll start with diversity first, and then let's define what diversity means, then move on. What does equity mean? How is that going to be implemented? And then inclusion, how do we make people feel included? If we break it down to like at least those three things, which is the title of this whole committee, the name of the committee, I feel like that might land better, just because you're getting more specific to what all of that means instead of this big umbrella term.
that, Jen.
I
What
think
does
that's great.
DEI mean to Scarborough?
Yeah, to Scarborough.
to Scarborough, yeah.
Yep, I like that very much.
Okay, I'm just making suggestions in this, I'm just gonna.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, so let me back up. If we are going to do that, do we keep the same first sentence and then underneath? Is that what you're saying? Okay, so I'll make sure I have it. Okay.
It'll kind of present like diversity, right,
And then.
can
more
be
specific.
defined as this, but not limited to X, Y, and Z. Because like you said, it encompasses every ism that you can think of.
And it's not about focusing on the differences, I think, between people. It's quite the opposite. It's
Right.
really kind of like trying to eliminate the impact that differences can have on folks. So like there are people who have advantages, you know, and it can be just natural intelligence.
Yeah.
Although that's not always an advantage, but it can be, right? And so like, how do we make sure that each student gets what they need to be successful and meet, like, I know Jeff keeps saying meet students where they are, like, I've heard that, like that refrain this year particularly, I think of training over and over, and I've heard teachers say it, and like, I love that. Like, I think that really pushes on what we want to do, which is meet every student and make sure that we help that student be as successful as they can be, which takes their cooperation and participation, you know, it helps to have their family support. And all that stuff, but like from the school's perspective, we can't control. We can't control everything, we can't control anything. Like, we have like a finite universe of what to do, and I just wanna like think about that, but I don't wanna limit it, like, that's why I didn't like the categories, because that comes from main human rights definition, very familiar with, it's a legal definition of protected categories. I don't wanna limit us to protected categories, this isn't about suing people for
Yeah.
discrimination, it's about, you know, if your student is, I'm trying to think of like, it's hard to talk about these topics it's really hard to single out a group of people and talk about disparate impact without making them feel bad. So like, if you single out any category, that's problematic, and it makes people, it can hurt people's feelings, and I care about that.
Yeah.
So, like, if you pick any group that is not treated well, I think we said socioeconomic, so let's go with that one. If you know, there's lots of advantages that can come if you don't have to worry about the cost of things, if your family can just support whatever it is that you need. And that ranges from athletic participation and club participation, all the way down to whether you're getting meals outside of school. Like, right, that is the range we're talking about. And that's not in that human rights definition.
And I like what you said earlier too about, you know, meeting kids where they're at. Some kids, like you're saying, higher intelligence. Do we make sure we have the programs so that meet their needs as well? So it's not just maybe those who are disadvantaged, but everybody. So,
It's about forging connections and a sense of belonging, really,
Yeah.
right? So, and we've got a more diverse student body, we have a growing community, we have, you know, and so how do we build those? How do we build that culture where people feel connected and then people feel like they belong? Right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about here too, respected and a sense of belonging and equity defined as meeting students, you know, where they are, how they are, right?
so when I hear the word equity, this is where I sometimes, my mind gets jumbled up a bit. So I've heard it spoken about in terms of equality of outcome. But like, is that what that means to you folks? Okay, good.
No.
No, I don't think we could ever fix
Because I'm like,
really,
that's like
Yeah.
utopia.
right, yeah,
That's, we can't get there.
yeah.
But
Cause it's
I
almost
like
like a Stepford Wives type situation where you have robots, like, right?
Yeah.
Because how could you ever
Exactly.
get all the kids up to
Yeah.
the same?
I'm all about equality of opportunity.
Yeah.
Everybody gets the chance.
Yeah, I
the
have quite the
opportunity to grow.
opposite, and I struggle with equity as well, because
Yeah.
it's got such a legal meaning in my head that like, it's hard for me to move over to the kind of new meaning that's emerged with it. And like, I don't believe highlighting people's differences and then pitting them against each other. I think when you start categorizing people and shoving people in boxes and separating them out,
Yes.
that's a very dangerous and uncomfortable place to be. And I don't, like,
Absolutely.
there's got to be a really legitimate purpose for that. It's really more about that individual, like,
Mhm.
what does this student need? You know, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and how do we serve them so that they can reach their potential? You know, and again, their participation in the process matters. The student who's engaged and eager to learn versus the student who is disengaged and not eager to learn, that student shows up differently, and we still have to educate every one of them. But it's gonna look different.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not one, there's no one thing that defines it. Nobody is defined by one single category.
Right.
Doesn't matter what box they check or don't check.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think, you know, based on a lot of the things that I hear and I read, it's like, oh my goodness, it's all about putting people in boxes and not, we're just all together. We're in this thing called life.
And
we're
I
doing it
don't
together.
think that you're alone in thinking that. I think
Yeah.
that is a broad kind of
Mhm.
thinking.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, I think of, and I just pulled it up too, this image of kids looking over the fence and they're all different heights.
Mhm.
So equality, they all get the same height of a step stool to step on to look over the fence,
Right.
but equity, they all have different sized
Right.
steps. So that it would- so I just pulled it up. Like, it just, that's how I would define equity, so making sure that everyone has access to the same thing. No matter, so you're meeting exactly what you're saying, you're meeting them where they're at and giving them the tools to.
Right,
Some
some people
people
might
might-
need additional tools, some.
Right. Right, but
More
then
so
not
than the
pitting
next
it against
student.
each other.
Right, right.
And that is not, I don't attribute that to me. I heard that at school. They didn't, I didn't create that. I heard it and I liked it and I got on it.
Yeah.
So that was not my brainchild. I wish it was. It was not.
So if we're going to define diversity for Scarborough, what diversity means for Scarborough?
Celebrating all the things that make us unique. I hate the words DEI because they are so loaded and I don't want to become involved in a debate about
Yeah.
the value of different boxes. I
Well,
really
and I
want to
don't think
celebrate
that,
it.
yeah, and that's like not what we intended either,
Yeah.
right? And nor, I don't think anybody here, I mean, I feel comfortable saying, I don't think anybody here wants that.
And DEI has evolved, right? That term is
Mhm.
evolving.
Yeah,
On the ground in the last 2 years in ways that I don't think, when it's, even this committee was created in like.
right. So diversity can be defined as, but not diversity, should we say diversity for Scarborough?
Like celebrating everybody's own unique individuality, like celebrating every individual student. I mean, that's, the diversity is what makes it, what makes us different, but it's not in a way to give us in boxes, it's a way to bring us together.
Yeah.
That's what makes us interesting, people.
Yeah, yeah.
It does, exactly.
Like, let's, variety is the spice of life,
Right.
right?
Right, because if we were all exactly the same, how boring would that be?
Well,
Oh, they're all like me.
Life would be so much better if we were all like you, John. So much better.
It'd be more efficient.
so do, do you think we should start, like, before we define it, do you think we should say specific to Scarborough? Does it feel like that's understood because this is our document?
Well, the first sentence references that specifically. I was really trying to conscientiously take it away from DEI
Yeah.
and news. I was trying to make it, what is DEI here?
I like having
Wordsmith.
that in there, having
Yeah.
DEI in Scarborough.
Yeah.
Cause just because there is such a variety of definitions for it everywhere else.
Right.
With connotations that we don't want to import into our. schools.
Exactly, exactly.
So we all feel good with diversity. Diversity can be defined as, but not limited to, celebrating every individual student.
Unique, I mean, you could say unique attributes or something, I don't know.
Every student's individuality.
Yeah.
Shannon, do you have a shared running doc?
Hmm?
Do you have a shared doc?
Yeah,
You?
yeah. You want me to send it back to you?
Yes, please.
And
I need to see it so I can.
I'm reading
Uh,
off.
we could say instead the board recognizes the definitions as follows. I don't know, it's not quite how I want.
Why don't we just put bullets in? Like
Mhm.
diversity
Right.
diversity means this,
Yeah.
equity means this.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, clear in the, make it clear the structure of how it's written,
Yeah,
instead of being like, we don't want to be involved in other people's space.
or- yeah.
Like, we don't have to like clearly signal that as clearly as we are.
And I think from just the past month, I've learned from talking to community members and hearing feedback. Chunking that information is a lot easier to digest than here's everything written.
Right,
For you to
yes.
figure out.
All right. Okay, so where we're at right now, diversity can be defined as, but not limited to, celebrating every student's individuality.
Let's keep going and come back to it.
Yeah,
I don't love it, but.
Equity is next. Equity can be, I'm gonna use the same thing across the defined as, but not limited to for now.
Giving every student what they need to be successful.
yeah,
No,
or ensuring students have the.
Every
Not
every
just the
student the
tools.
tools they need to be
Yeah,
successful.
yeah.
let's keep going.
Okay, and then inclusion.
That's a belonging piece, for like making sure everybody feels like they belong.
Yeah.
And a lot of DEIs are diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, sort of been involved with that in
DIB.
titles, yeah.
Oh, they threw in the J too?
Yeah.
Well,
It's- What is the
Yeah,
B?
the J's, they,
Belonging.
yeah, belonging or justice as that last.
Did you, I'm sorry, did you say V like Victor or
Oh,
V
no,
like
B
boy?
is like
B.
belonging.
Oh, Okay,
or
I
belong.
missed that too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
B, that's in
Victory.
Yeah, I thought, that's what I.
Because we got
I
there.
thought I heard it.
Wait.
We're winning.
So inclusion can be defined as, but not limited to make, what did we say, what did I thought someone said something.
Said belonging.
Ensuring that all students feel,
You have a sense of
have a sense of belonging.
Or,
Would feel like they belong. And do we want to bring it beyond students, to all, everybody in our community feel like they belong, to the Scarborough school community? Do we want our staff to feel like they belong?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
We
so.
want everyone to feel like this is, like, we want to make
Mhm.
this a good place to be when you're not where your other places are to be,
I think so. And,
you know?
and not just staff, but, you know, their parents and guardians, so they're.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
So every student, so just back up to diversity. Every student. Comma, staff member, comma, family, I mean, how do we wanna, how do we want to?
I mean,
Students.
Community member?
students, staff, and families, yeah.
Yeah, that works. That's in our other. You're like, yes, that's from the other places.
Yeah. Students, staff, and family. Just,
Giving every student, staff, and family. And family, the tools they need to be successful. All students. Okay,
Is this document on for voting later?
it is on for voting later, but,
Does it make sense to wait a month so we can digest it after we draft it?
yeah, that's what I was
And
going
have
to,
the
offer up a
committee
tabling.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that the DEI committee has an opportunity to look through it, the community has an opportunity to look through it.
Yeah.
Everyone here has an opportunity, and then we can make any changes between now and a month feels good, because that gives
Yeah.
you time to hold a DEI
after
meeting.
Christmas,
Yeah, and people can get in and. Mhm,
after vacation.
yeah,
I would love to move to the charge, because that's where I think
Mhm.
we
Yes.
have a lot
Yeah.
of work to do.
Can I
Yeah.
say one thing on
Yeah.
the inclusion part? So this is just something I was listening to this morning. I was trying to be prepared and educated for today. So it was, talking about, and it's funny because I've found this happening to myself as well. Just for an example, I was down at a football thing with my son, and there were two gentlemen of color that were standing there working away on coming up with some football play. And, you know, I said something, and then after I said it, I'm like, oh, no, did that sound wrong? And so the one hesitancy I have is on the inclusion part, or I don't even know which part it fits in. But sometimes we can make people so aware of different things that can be taken wrong, you know what I mean? That it makes you question everything you say or overthink everything you say. And then sometimes like, you know what, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm just not gonna say anything.
yeah,
Yeah,
And
well, we all live there, I think that's a
Yeah.
societal.
yeah,
yeah, and so I guess I'm trying to make sure whatever we do, we're trying to avoid that, to try to we all want to do, I guess everybody should have the intentions that people are coming and talking with you with good intentions. And so for me, like, Frayla, if you were to say something mean to me, never,
It can happen.
but, you know, I need to be resilient enough to know,
As presuming no ill intent,
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
presuming no ill intent.
Correct.
Like some groups,
Yeah.
when you set rules at the beginning of group meetings, sometimes that's one that I hear often, which is you presume no ill intent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You still have to deal with the impact.
Yeah.
But you start from the outset presuming no. ill
Yeah.
intent.
and it's hard to do.
mhm,
It takes practice, it takes work, but I guess I want to make sure that kind of permeates things as well, just presuming no ill intent.
Well,
Does that-
and yeah, and I think to your point, like when you think about the charge, like one of the things that I think is important is that everybody's voice is invited to the table.
Yeah, so diversity of
Yeah,
thought.
Right.
of thought.
Yeah, so that you're not, while there is benefit in a like-minded group, there's also benefit in having dissenting
Oh,
opinions.
yeah.
Right? And
For sure.
that's the case with anything, not, you know, anything you do. And so, maybe that's one of our part of the charge.
Yes, seeking
I
out,
agree with that. I think
seeking
that
out,
would work.
yeah,
Yeah,
also seeking out diversity of thought.
yeah. So maybe that's the charge of the committee is to, maybe that could be one of our items.
I agree,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think that's important, I think we should be, well, I think that's part of belonging. Like, everybody needs to belong, and if you
Yeah.
are not
Right.
able to express yourself freely. With the understanding that you're not having ill intent and trying to hurt people,
Yeah,
Right.
then. You know, and we should have room for mistakes,
yeah.
Right.
which is something that I think
Absolutely.
right now is
Gotta have
hard in
grace.
society.
Really,
Yeah.
right, really hard.
I think we're seeing that play out in the board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. There has to be room for people to make mistakes,
Yeah.
be accountable for their mistakes and then move on.
Yep.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about that. That's 100%.
yeah, that's a great example.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I heartedly agree.
All right, so, I find personally the work with the board finance committee to assess budgetary
Yeah.
needs irrelevant at this point.
Yes,
I
please.
mean, yeah,
There's no mechanism for this.
right. I mean, they can certainly make recommendations to the board and the board can decide whether that needs to be part of the budget process, you know. I
As
mean,
a really like the way the budget is constructed, there's no mechanism for this. It's
Right.
completely irrelevant. There's such a disconnect, it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah,
Which I tried to explain to them, but they didn't. and they didn't do that.
Well, the good news is you're on the finance committee.
So I know.
We can talk.
Like, let me tell you how it really works. You're not in.
What is now would be the third one, because I added that seek out diversity thought on the committee. The review data collected from the climate survey, school equity audits and listening tours, that's already done, but I don't know if that. I mean, you can continue reviewing the data, but at this point, it's.
I want to take a step back from the charge before we go through these individually, because
Okay.
like, I hate this entire charge. I hate everything about it.
yeah, yeah.
I hated it
Yes.
from day one, but it's like it was, I was a committee member, I wasn't like in charge, the charge was handed to us. And then amended. Given to
Mhm.
us. And I'm not trying to critique past boards, I think there was good intention, like I'm not
Oh,
being,
no, it's okay.
but like having lived with this charge for 3 years. I don't know what to do with it. When
Yeah.
people on the committee ask me now as a board member, what do we do with this? I essentially make stuff up because it's, if you really, like, they are trying to draft a strategic plan based on this charge, which is appropriate. That's exactly what we want them to do, is focus on the
Yeah.
charge. It is not feasible. Like, it's just
Right, well,
not feasible.
we really, yeah, we have to decide what exactly it is we want them to do, because right now they feel, I mean, and rightfully so, having sat on it now, it's just sort of like, well, this stuff. You know, I mean, it's not very direct at all.
I saw in the minutes, I was reading through the minutes the other day, and I saw that it looked like some of these surveys were being looked at, but it looked like whoever was going to look at it needed some direction, so.
So there were surveys 3 years ago. That data it was a very facilitated process. We looked at that data. It was evaluated. We did that. That's done.
Yeah.
And now with this charge, they're trying to figure out where to find data. And so there's all sorts of ideas about where we can find data. We're trying to, maybe other school districts will share their data with us so we can see what their data looks like. Maybe there'll be more data coming from the school that they'll let us have access to. Listening tours, what does that even mean? Do you,
Yeah,
like, who are we listening to?
Yeah.
And-
I
yeah.
was gonna ask you
Doing
what
it.
are these things?
I mean,
So like, I don't think going through this charge is all that useful.
Yeah.
My question to each one of you is, looking at the purpose we just drafted and thought about and are still about like tweaking.
Yeah.
What in a very specific, feasible, like a possible, like something you can achieve direction, can we give this? What do we want them to do? Do we want them, like, we don't want them to stray into territory where they get into trouble when they talk about specific incidents at schools and identify people. We
Right.
know that.
No.
Like,
Right.
we've learned a lot of lessons about what not to do as a committee. That's not particularly helpful. What would be very helpful is, what do we want them to do?
Specific.
Do
Yeah.
we want them to evaluate data? If so, what data and how are we gonna get it to them? Do we want them to issue a report card? This is the feedback from the community. These are issues in the school. Here's a report card. Here's a report. What do you want them to do? To do the purpose? Like, if we want them to foster DEI, okay. They are straying into territory that rightfully belongs in the equity team work process. It belongs in inner school work process with the protections of confidentiality that students receive. And so and we don't want them doing that.
No,
So we need to tell them in a very specific, achievable, goal-directed way what to do.
can I give
Right.
some examples of what they've done or what I? One thing that they did do and did see through that I thought was really good is that and maybe like your report card idea is about almost there. They were able to identify that the students didn't have an accurate understanding of how to report incidents that happened to them.
Yeah.
And so from that, came a recommendation to the board that we update the student handbook and we make the process more available to students so that they can understand whom they report to, where they go. So that was something that came directly from the DEI committee that was an amazing recommendation.
And I think they should, like, there's a lot of rumor, conjecture, speculation, conversation about things. I think I said it, I was very pejorative once when I said, like, I'm sick of hearing about Scarborough in the news. It's a few years ago about mistakes that have been made. There's a place for that information, but we need to be very careful and directive with how they use it. Like, I think writing an annual report would be good. Report card, I feel like I said that, and I want to take it back a little bit because I don't want it to be a judgment. I don't want it to
No.
be like, you get an F or and the committee honestly wouldn't do that. They're not, if you're a listener to their meetings, you'll understand what I mean. I don't think they're capable of that. Like, they're judgmental, but I don't think they would be like, you're gonna fail. And that's not what it's about. But like, I think highlighting issues in a very anonymized way is appropriate. Bringing issues to the board's attention so that we can refer it to John.
Refer to where it goes,
Where it
yeah.
goes.
The one thing I would want, and again, this is bigger than this document, but maintaining confidentiality, making sure that they understand they're not the disciplinary arm of this district is
Correct.
highly
Right.
important in
Yes.
this, because what I don't want them doing is thinking, okay, we're going to write this essentially State of the Union report for the board, and they go out and start asking questions, start almost, to your point, inserting themselves in procedures and processes that they shouldn't be a part of. Do you see what I mean?
They're not investigators.
Right, they're not investigators, they're not disciplinarians. This is not their purview.
But
Can they connect with the school's social workers? So that they can get feedback on them on, what kinds of trends are they seeing that they need to address?
And that's in that data collection listening tour, like a listening tour, like, doesn't quite fit.
Mhm.
But I think that would be, again, I think we have to be very specific in an anonymized fashion.
Yeah.
Highlight issues that the district should work on. One of the other things was, and this was done inside the district, it was discussed at a couple meetings. But like making sure that kids' names are pronounced correctly at the beginning of the
Mhm.
year. I think that was a
So
really good initiative.
Right, yeah.
That was a fantastic initiative, and that, I don't know that it came from there, but it was discussed in there, but we wanna make sure that, like, these good ideas that are great for our school, we wanna foster those, nurture them, and bring them to the surface, in a way that's controlled so that people are appropriate, because community members don't know FERPA. I had no idea about FERPA, I mean, I did have an idea about FERPA when I went on the board, because I'm a lawyer, but I didn't know FERPA, I hadn't read it. I wasn't familiar with that as I am now.
What is FERPA?
but it's.
It's like
You can't,
HIPAA
you can't say
for school.
students' name role. You can't say students or staff's names role. You can't identify people.
Yeah, just like HIPAA.
Student information is private.
Oh,
You
okay.
can't say
Okay.
this student did
Identify.
an identifiable information in this form or any other form related to the school. That would be a
Right.
violation of their privacy.
Gotcha.
Right.
I didn't understand that to that extent. Like I knew FERPA existed. I'd heard
Yeah.
the term. I wasn't able to say that.
Yeah.
When I started. There's many people on that committee who are in the same position. And then there are staff members who like should really be well versed in FERPA. And it's a weird discordant juxtaposition of people who have varying degrees of knowledge.
Right.
And we want to make sure that they follow the rules, but we don't want to get them into trouble for not following the rules because we haven't told them.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so I have down, keeping in mind that the committee is not the investigatory nor disciplinary arm of the district, and while maintaining confidentiality
Of students and staff.
of students and
Yeah,
staff.
when I want to be granular,
Yeah,
very specific.
okay, so we want them to collect data and issue an annual report? Is that what you want to instead of?
I don't want to say
report?
collect data. I want to say, like, I want to be more specific than that because they're gonna ask me where to get the data. And I don't know the answer to that question. But to
Well-
highlight issues.
Touching base with.
Yeah.
social workers.
Yeah.
Well, and,
Yeah.
and maybe
and Stephanie,
possibly.
and you a little bit for this,
Yeah.
like what's appropriate.
And building.
I mean, possibly, you know, thinking about recommendations and perspective sharing, you know, we have all of our staff really focused on SEL, but also DEI as well, in the sense of, like, for example, you know, our instructional coaches and our leadership team read Culturally Responsive Teaching, Soretta Hammond's book, and that talks a lot about how, you know, how can we best meet kids where they are in our classrooms and really ground that in kind of what we're doing as professionals to build that culture of belonging, right? And so how can this committee, which essentially is providing recommendations or perspective to the board and ultimately to us as educators to help implement, right? How do those two work hand in hand? Because now we've also functioned for 2 years running with, you know, a leadership team, DEI, professional learning team. And then there's been a lot of offshoots from that as well, you know.
So
how
we
to-
don't want to duplicate, because I'm sure there's some.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and there's establishing kind of like a charge and a vision for what DEI looks like in Scarborough or how it plays out in our schools. And then there is us as educators and leaders who are implementing and setting up and developing that culture in schools and in classrooms.
Where does this committee fit into that process? Like, can we solicit information from other districts, or from other entities to
Yeah.
provide information? Should we highlight the positive things we want in the district? Because I don't think the report should be negative. I like, that's not a report no one wants to read.
Well, and
What are the highlight the positives and the work?
yeah, right. So there was like a subcommittee of the DEI committee that was looking at equity teams, for example,
Yes,
and
yeah.
researching how does this happen in schools in different districts. You know, some of which are a lot more culturally diverse, at least than Scarborough is, and has done some really great work. Or, I mean, the example of student names at the beginning, I mean, it's a perfect example of being able to highlight something that maybe wouldn't come to mind immediately. And be able to kind of highlight, you know, like the hotspots, so, right? And not be the disciplinary wing or focusing on a specific incident that may have happened, but being able to identify, okay, well, if you feel like you don't belong or don't like, what was it that flipped the switch for you, right? And that's why the students, I think, on the committee can be so powerful and important, but.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is that like, this isn't a one-off, like this event happened at the high school, so we're going to go report to the board. This is more of a highlight for the
Like
year.
School bus, so like
Right.
the school bus comes up all the time, like people are mean on the school bus. I try not to like get really focused on the Facebook page about that, but it comes up more than often than not.
Yeah.
It does.
One
Like,
person posts and then everyone sharing.
Yeah, they're the posts that go crazy. I don't want any one student to be bullied on the school bus. Nobody at the table.
Right.
But like, if that's an issue that can be highlighted, you know, that's something that like the school bus is a hotspot. The PD's not gonna draft a plan to fix it. They're not gonna figure out a solution. What they can say is, look, this is something in the community that's concerning.
Yeah.
So this is an area that maybe the district wants to focus on, but I think there should be some annual report to give them a cadence, give them a goal to
Yeah.
direct it, something, again,
Yeah.
specific, achievable, like when we set up goals for people in work and life, they should be specific and achievable, and I think that was my thing with the Chargers, where I was like, I don't know how to achieve any of these things, and I care, I'm interested, I work hard, I've read it a lot, I've tried to figure out what these mean. I can't do this.
Yeah.
I also wonder if there's an opportunity, because as I'm listening to you talk about, how can this committee get more information? Is there the opportunity? I really do like the idea of listening tours. I think we need to be careful, though, when we talk to any one group, that we don't overgeneralize those statements. And so, like, how are we able to get information around to what extent, right? Because, I think you mentioned a couple minutes ago, if somebody hears about a particular thing that happens, there might be an incident that happens that is problematic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a day-to-day occurrence.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
context.
So how do we frame that? And,
Yeah.
what types of things do we have that we could lean to assess more about what people's perceptions are and how those might change over time? So for example, like, does our panorama data, that's an annual survey that we provide to students. Does that give us any information in terms of, how our students' sense of belonging changing over time? Are we staying at, this stagnant place? Are we making some inroads and improvements, et cetera? Is there an opportunity to take the perception survey that the DEI committee gave, I guess it's almost 4 years ago now, to reassess those groups, to get a look around, okay, this is what we got for feedback from, students, staff, and families at that time. What are people's feelings at this time, right? Because so much of this work really is around perception. I mean, there are some things that are incident related. So, we could take a look and say, how many substantiated incidents of bullying do we have?
Yeah.
Those types of things, right? So those are more concrete numbers, but there's much of this work that is about what is your perception of how things compare now as to before, right? To what degree, right? Like, think about the surveys when you say, not at all, a little, somewhat, most of the time, all of the time, those types of questions.
And how do we make sure that there's a flow of that data to the committee so that they can do the
Right.
work? Because one of the things they've spent weeks trying to figure out is what data and how do we get our hands on it? And
Right.
like, this committee shouldn't be. This committee can't figure that question.
Right.
That's just not a question that's appropriate. Like,
Yeah.
we need to have a method to say, you're gonna get this data every spring. This is what we
Yeah.
want you to
Correct.
do with it. And so that, like, that's. I
Because if
have-
you're changing, right, like, you can't keep changing your
Yeah.
source of information.
No,
Because every time you look at a unique source of information, you're like interrupting that through line.
well, it's a snapshot of
Right.
that moment in time,
Right.
of those questions.
So you
Yeah.
need to keep looking at the same kind of information to help you know what your progress looks or doesn't look like.
So, and would it be helpful to get like some report outs about what other, like, research from other districts? Like, would that be helpful? Like, I don't wanna wait, I don't wanna give this committee busy work. Nobody has time for that. But what would be helpful? Like, what does this board need this committee to do? Why does it exist?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I don't, I think if we make it too specific. I mean, I think it should be up to the DEI committee, like, maybe there is an issue that really, like, what are other districts doing? And maybe it's sourcing another type of information, like maybe it's talking to parents and teachers and stuff, I don't, I don't know how you do that though, but I mean, I'm having a hard time finding what I'm trying to say, but.
Is it maybe like examining other districts' best practices? Is it
I
something
mean,
like
I
that?
just think that if that's, I don't wanna be too specific there, because that might be something that the district, the committee would do. I don't wanna nail them down to that. You know what I mean? Like that might be something, that's an option for them. But that's only if other districts are willing to give up that information, and is that, like, I don't know, maybe you must talk about some of that stuff within the superintendent's groups, right? Like if you. Maybe that, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering, do issues percolate up to you or Diane, or that
sure.
need addressing that, that maybe not one-offs, but maybe you hear similar things over the course of time that you feel would be helpful for the committee to address? For the principals being more of a school principals night.
I really think what I was saying before, just around the charge of the DEI committee just could be really valuable in terms of setting that vision, and then making sure we have ways to address whether or not, like I'm just thinking of the professional development that we're already doing that are like, is it having the desired impact? Are we, are there, like the bus is a great example, or the lunchroom, or these other places where, kids are it's less structured. It's not just like in the classroom, right? Like, 'cause teachers, a lot of times will have that defined structure to their classrooms, but then there's a bigger culture in the school as well. So how are we addressing those things as a community? And that's not just, within the purview of just the classroom teacher or the rest of the staff. And
Yeah.
So it almost sounds to me like what I'm hearing from your part, it's like this idea of the annual report, like we have it in there, how they are going to collect the data might be. Like we're still, as the board, the big 40,000 foot view, right?
Right.
So perhaps their work is to take this charge and figure out how they're going to do this annual report.
And I also wonder if, and I don't know that it's particularly outlined here, but could be potentially quite valuable, is what is the, Jeff spoke about the professional development that we've been doing with our staff. What is the opportunity for us to provide education to the larger community, to our families,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you're using the example of, of the bus as an example, right? And so if a parent is posting information on a social media page about their experience on the bus, is that the most efficient way to resolve that issue?
Bob's not.
Right?
Yeah.
And so,
Right.
right, and so,
Channel.
right, so how do we do that? How do we help our families understand that motto of, meeting kids where they are, as they are, and what that means, right? And we do the same thing with staff.
yeah, or even other routine things like registering and enrolling. I mean, there's a lot of things that feed into feeling like you belong,
Right.
that go
Could
beyond.
this committee promote that sense of belonging for all families by doing some of those kinds of things?
So would that be like creating I like the annual report because it gives them a
Yep.
goal, it gives us the
Yeah.
information, it
They
tells.
can
us.
be like, look,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a big thing. Let's focus on that.
Yeah, so how to support whatever the purpose statement ends up being, how to support that within the district, and then ask for, I think directions on maintaining confidentiality, not investigating and not be disciplinary. I think that's good as part of that. But also then, talking about the study, the vision, that piece of sort of like making recommendations about how to foster this sense of belonging. And then I think you can't, see, this committee does do good work on its own devices with like these little projects they've spun out that they've actually been really cool
Mhm.
to watch develop. So
Yeah.
like, this committee is like, it does good work. I just think with the more focus.
Yeah. It needs to, it needs
Well, it's that
to,
loose tight, right?
Yeah.
So being
Okay.
able to be kind of
Yeah.
tight on what you want, what the charge is, and that's why it was bothering you so much, right? But then allow for that flexibility and what actually, you know, how that's gonna play out and what might get done.
So what did you say? Make recommendations I have related to fostering belonging in Scarborough. I don't think that's what you said.
well, I
I
mean,
think I made that up.
No, I said all those words, I'm not sure. I said. So,
I mean, I'll leave it there for us to like think about for now. Is that,
write an annual report.
yes, I have that down.
Regarding the purpose.
To highlight the positives and work to be done in the district.
Yes.
Like, you could do
Um,
like a state of the union.
That's what I mean. It's like a state of Scarborough.
Yeah.
That's what it,
yes, okay,
In reviewing the data, can we say from the panorama study, or is that too specific? And can we make sure we get that data, like reviewing data that is given to the committee by the district?
or
Because I
can we say the prescribed data set? Because if, like.
evaluating the data provided to the committee, and I think they
Yeah.
are competent enough to figure out how to
Yeah.
make that pipeline, like, I do trust them to
Yeah.
do that. It's not a trust issue, I trust everyone on that committee, they're hardworking, I just, direction, I think
Yeah.
they need direction.
I mean, maybe
Back to the panorama survey also, or just the
Mhm.
students? Okay.
Yeah, so there's have to be a way to make sure, like, there's disaggregated data, I'm assuming.
We would just be reporting out high level data. We wouldn't be reporting it out by student or
Yeah.
by, you know, even by school. Cause, you know, I think that if the committee wanted to look at that data, it would be, you know, what is Scarborough Public Schools looking
But you
like?
can do that,
We have the ability to
you
do
can do
that.
that, yeah,
Yes.
no, but you can give them data that is appropriate for them
Yes.
to evaluate. So they
Correct.
have something to use to look at this.
and when does that data come out? Usually,
The panorama survey is generally February or March.
Perfect.
so maybe we wanna say like, you know, in, you know. After it comes out, April, you know, like,
I think it should be the end of the year,
Spring
I think
or-
they should follow the school year, I think it should be a report that comes out in June,
okay, yes, that's what.
Their annual report is gonna come out in June.
Yeah,
May or June.
and then that gives them the summer to think about what,
What they want, how to fix it, gives us time to give them feedback on the
Right.
report if we have any.
Okay, so hold on one second, hold on. So they're gonna highlight that, they're gonna write this annual report. They're going to report on their annual report to the board in
Yeah.
June.
in June, yeah.
Okay. So that gives them a timeline. Their annual report is due in June. Okay,
In the summer months, they'll evaluate the process and make any recommendations to the board about changes to that process.
say that again, I'm sorry.
So in the summer, during the summer, they should evaluate the report process and make recommendations to the board for any changes necessary to accomplish the report for next year. So gear up for next year, starting in September.
Okay, so evaluate the annual report through the summer and make recommendations to the school board.
About any support needed to draft the report for the next year. So it's a reflection, it's how
yeah.
to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, where they want to go next.
Yeah, I mean, we can. There's three pieces, right? There's the students, the staff and the families. I mean, we maybe wanna make sure that somehow it's worded in there so that there's a, like, you know, Diane brought up like a focus on how things impact each group.
Yeah, the report should report out on student experience, staff experience, and a wider community experience.
Yeah.
And may include research from other districts, sort of to your point. If they
Okay,
want
yeah.
to look outward, great. If they don't want to look outward,
Yeah,
no pressure. Again, this is
That was
highly
really well
competent
said.
people, like these are good, hardworking people who are really
Right.
actually capable.
we
This
want
charge
that
is not
language in there.
achievable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have, let me, just because I have two recommendations. So we have reflect and evaluate on the annual report's findings throughout the summer and make recommendations, make any recommendations to the school board. And then I have evaluate data provided to the committee. And then I have another, make recommendations related to fostering belonging. So I don't know if we need that one, if they're gonna be
Those
making.
all should be part of the report.
Yeah.
But this committee writes a report every year. That's what this
Yeah,
committee
so let me
does.
put that in, like that, like
Yeah.
sub of the report.
Yeah.
Okay. One other thing that the committee did that was, I think they started it and I was really excited and then it completely fell by the wayside. And that was related to the celebration of holiday party
Yeah.
policy. And what they found and started with was that teachers were struggling to interpret the policy. They didn't know how to celebrate holidays with their kids. They were unsure. And then as we were looking at this policy was last revised in 2002. And so, sure, I'm sure that they're very confused as to how to celebrate, right? But then this whole process like fell by the wayside and the committee never picked it back up again. So one of the things I think would be, I would like to see them do personally is take a look at our policies with an eye towards our
Make that part of the
definition of
report.
DEI. And yeah, it's a part of
And then they can pick
our recommendations.
projects to work on.
Anyone wants to look at policies, I'm a girl. I love it.
Policy review.
Yeah,
Policy review, yeah, I mean, look at the policies.
Yeah,
Make it, that can be part of the annual report, is like reviewing the policies. I mean, it's-
yeah.
the more eyes on our policies, the better our policies are.
Cause at the end of the day, they're supposed to report to the board.
yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've been here a year and they haven't. you know,
They haven't
other
had
than-
anything to
They haven't
report.
Right.
had any recommendations to make,
Well,
so, but you give reports out or.
yeah, but I mean,
but
the
yeah, there's
finance
been no
committee, there's
recommendations.
no place for them to report about finance.
Yeah.
Right.
The review tourism data, they have none for the
Right.
last 4
Yeah.
years. They
They
had
have
data
nothing
4
to
years
do.
ago.
Yeah.
The raising awareness of work happening within the district, they sort of grappled with, and I think that was the
Yeah.
sort of the spin-off projects. The making recommendations to the board, they did that the first year,
Mhm.
and then they don't even, like, we've talked a lot about when do we make those? How do we make those? What are we gonna make? How do we decide what we're gonna make? It's taken us a year to figure out a decision-making process to, or make, even to vote on the recommendations to make to
Right.
the board. And like, I can be critical, we all know that. The board did not give them a lot of structure at first. That's why this document comes into effect. And they've spent a lot of time spinning their wheels trying to create process for themselves. Which I think one lesson I've taken away from this is sometimes a little more structure is helpful.
Can I throw in one thing? I know we're running short on time, but just something to think about. Just hearing all the conversation tonight and Diane, something you said triggered this in my mind because it's been kind of mulling around in my brain. Is it worth, or is it something to think about having a community forum on what efforts is the school taking towards DEI, SEL, between all the different things that we have going on, just informing
That might
the
be some,
family.
Delegate that to
I was
them.
gonna say,
They could put on a fall
Yeah.
community forum about issues highlighting.
We're doing it and then look for feedback.
Absolutely.
or they could do
For
it,
feedback.
This committee could do that for us.
what if they did it in the spring and that was included in? the
Perfect.
report?
Timings are, like, I don't care what the time.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm- all
But
right.
like that is a perfect task for this,
Yeah.
this committee would kill that for 'em.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they would run with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so from professional development to what we're doing in everywhere.
Yeah.
So
just
say that could be in
the whole-
conjunction.
And I think with that organization, they would know exactly what to do.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so host a spring community forum. Tell me again, I'm sorry.
It's almost like another State of the Union. Here's where DEI fits in, whether it's professional development or in what the
Highlighting
different
DEI efforts in the,
within the district.
in the district.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, so we haven't teased out the details of having a joint community forum with town council. But maybe, like you were saying, Julie, it could be coupled with some of those discussions.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if they would like specialize, because like we did a whole MML deep dive. You'll
Yeah.
hear about it during my committee report. But it was fascinating. It was fascinating. It was so
Oh,
interesting.
it was so good.
It was so good. Those are the efforts that they've made to really meet families who don't, who English is not their first language and who are struggling with languages, for all the different efforts that they've employed to get children registered and into the district. And then, I mean, like, it's,
Yeah.
our staff are amazing.
Our staff, yeah,
Amazing.
like seriously, it's so. So.
And like, we should be having uniforms talk about that, highlighting the good work.
Yeah.
We did know that, but it's
I
nice to
do,
highlight.
it's 7 o'clock and so I need to pause because we probably all need.
I need like a, yes.
But I do wanna say one thing,
John.
what, and we'll pick this back up after people have had time to read and digest, we'll pick it back up at a future meeting. In a month, I think you said, but the other thing, I still wanna go back to talking about the voting, the quorum and voting.
Yeah.
And I also wanna look at the composition, because right now, we don't have 21 members.
No.
And so do we need to take that number down? Are they still soliciting membership? So those are the two I see outstanding.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay, yeah,
supposed to be
21
split.
seems.
Yeah, and they're just not there. So if they're not there, like, why don't we pull that number down to a more manageable number?
Yeah.
I agree.
We're gonna move over, so.
All right. So go ahead and take, let me, adjourn. Agenda item 5.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All right. So we take about just a few minutes to run to the ladies' room or men's room.
Yes, not.
You always.
I'll run to the ladies' room.
Restroom.